Welcome to the 2025 Idaho Division of Vocational Rehabilitation Ethics Training. The objectives of this training are to provide an overview of the IDVR ethics policy, ensure that by the end of this training, IDVR employees will understand the agency's expectations regarding professional conduct, and that IDVR employees will know how to get help when they have questions on interpreting the policy. This training refers to the written IDVR ethics policy. We strongly recommend you read the ethics policy and have it available to refer to during the training while you are taking the quiz. All IDVR employees are required to undergo yearly ethics training, successfully complete the quiz, and sign an acknowledgement that they understand the consequences of violating the policy. The purpose of the ethics policy is to outline a set of principles to guide the conduct of IDVR employees in a business context. It is intended to provide guidance and expectations regarding the conduct of all agency team members. The principles outlined in this policy are essential to maintaining the legality, professionalism, and health of our workplace as we each perform our respective roles in the agency. The ethics policy isn't just about how we work with our program participants. It also includes the expectation of how we work with and interact with each other. Sometimes ethics aren't clear. IDVR employees are expected to consult with their supervisor or HR if they are unsure on what their course of action should be. All IDVR employees are required to adhere to this policy. If you have a professional license or certification that holds you to a higher ethical standard, that will take precedence when ethical situations arise. Conflicts of interest and dual relationships. All IDVR team members must maintain impartiality and avoid situations where personal interests interfere with professional duties. Prohibited relationships in the VR context includes family members, intimate partners, and friends. When you become aware of a potential dual relationship or conflict of interest, immediately notify your supervisor or HR representative. We are going to walk through some scenarios on these two topics in the next slides. Scenario 1. A team member begins exchanging personal text messages with a program participant, discussing topics unrelated to the participant's case. Over time, the team member adds the participant on social media, engaging in frequent personal conversations and liking and commenting on their posts. Eventually, the team member and the participant develop a personal friendship while the participant's case is still open. Pause the video and think about any policy violations this team member has engaged in. We will discuss this on the next slide. Now that you've had some time to think about this scenario, let's talk about the policy violation concerns. In this scenario, the dual relationship policy was violated. In what ways was this a violation of the dual relationship policy? The employee developed a personal relationship with the program participant while their case was still open. The IDVR ethics policy clearly states that personal relationships, which include social media interactions with program participants, is prohibited for 6 months after case closure, longer even if you are held to a higher standard by your professional code of ethics. Why is this such a problem? Here's why. Dual relationships happen. However, when you engage in a professional dual relationship, you run the risk of harming the agency and all program participants because the ability to make objective decisions is compromised. IDVR understands that dual relationships occur, but the policy provides steps to take when an employee becomes aware of a potential for a dual relationship. Scenario 2. A team member at IDVR is scheduled to conduct an intake and recognizes the name of the applicant on their calendar as a former coworker from a previous job. Recognizing the potential for a dual relationship, the team member immediately informs their supervisor about the prior professional connection. The supervisor reviews the situation and determines that in order to maintain professional boundaries and avoid any potential conflict of interest, the applicant should be reassigned to another team member to complete the intake. Pause the video here and consider how the team member did or did not adhere to the ethics policy. We will discuss this on the next slide. As we discussed in Scenario 1, dual relationships can occur. This scenario explores an example of the appropriate steps to take once a team member becomes aware of a potential for a dual relationship by recognizing the potential, reporting it, and following supervisor direction. This is a good example of how a team member can ensure they are adhering to the agency's ethics policy and maintaining professional boundaries. Scenario 3. A team member at the agency greets a participant with a side hug during each meeting. Despite the participant's body language indicating discomfort, including stiffening and stepping back, the individual later verbally expresses to the team member that they prefer not to be touched, but the team member continues to initiate brief pats on the shoulder and casual touches on the arm during conversations. Additionally, when the participant expressed distress, the team member placed their hand on the participant's knee to comfort them. The participant appeared uneasy but does not verbally object. The team member does not acknowledge or adjust their behavior. Pause the video here and reflect on any potential policy violation concerns with this scenario. We will discuss this on the next slide. This scenario explores concerns regarding physical touch. Per policy, physical touch must be appropriate for the situation and consensual by all parties. An example of appropriate physical touch could be a business handshake. In this situation, the employee is not adhering to the policy regarding physical touch. It is difficult to maintain a professional relationship when the lines are blurred between professional and casual contact. This includes casual physical contact outlined in the example. The team member ignored signs, both spoken and unspoken, that the participant didn't want to be touched. The employee has more power in this situation by default. Whether they mean to or not, they are using that power in an unfair way by touching the participant in a way that wasn't wanted or appropriate. Scenario 4. While a team member was visiting a high school, one of the students was excited to see them and ran up to give the team member a hug. The team member was surprised and unsure how to react and was unable to avoid the hug. During the next visit at the school, the team member encounters the student in the hallway and again gets greeted with a hug. During their next scheduled meeting, the team member discusses with the student appropriate professional behavior, including hugs. The team member explains that you would not hug your boss, and hugs are generally not appropriate in a professional setting. The student agrees to practice handshakes instead of hugs with the team member. This scenario demonstrates an example where the team member adhered to the agency ethics policy by establishing clear boundaries with the student and doing it in a way that was respectful and in a way that the student understood. What are some other ways that you could respectfully handle situations regarding physical touch with program participants and maintain ethical boundaries? We have covered some scenarios with some big ethical requirements. Now we are going to provide an overview of additional ethical principles that are just as important. The first one is duty to report. If you become aware of an abuse or neglect of a minor or vulnerable adult, you are required to report the information. If you're not sure, consult with someone on OSL. Collaboration and teamwork. Work together and cooperate with your team members to provide effective and timely service delivery to all IDVR participants. Comply with policies and procedures. Team members are required to know what our rules are for service delivery. If you don't know, ask. Knowing policies and procedures allows us to provide services fairly to program participants. Justice. It's easy to be objective and fair with people you agree with. Justice means if you have different viewpoints than an employee or program participant, you are not intentionally or unintentionally treating them differently. Lawfulness. When you are working or using agency resources, you are required to follow all applicable federal, state, and local laws. Personal responsibility. Take responsibility for the work you produce. Understand the scope of your role as an agency employee and talk with your supervisor if you have concerns about the duties you are asked to perform. Respect for the dignity, rights, and autonomy of others. Treat people how you want to be treated. Participants have the right to make decisions that you do not agree with or you believe may not be in their best interest. Engaging in discussion about politics, religion, or personal views with program participants and stakeholders is outside of professional and ethical behavior. Teasing. Humor and good-natured banter can be an effective tool for building rapport. However, All IDVR employees are required to ensure any humor is appropriate to the time, place, and individual and discontinue immediately if you become aware that the joking is not acceptable. Confidentiality. All IDVR employees are required to adhere to the PII and confidential customer information policy. Do no harm. Advocate for participants' well-being and talk with your supervisor if you feel a participant is engaging in unsafe or dangerous activities. Integrity and honesty. Be honest in your work and interactions. Follow through on your commitments. This concludes the 2025 IDVR Ethics Training. Next steps. Complete the quiz that follows this video. You must receive a score of at least 80% to pass. It is strongly recommended that you have a copy of the ethics policy available to refer to while answering the quiz questions. Next, access the acknowledgement by clicking on the files link in the training. Sign and submit your acknowledgement form to your center training specialist. Training must be completed no later than close of business on March 31st. This policy is effective starting April 1st, 2025.